In the remote southeastern corner of Alaska lies Wrangell St. Elias, the largest national park in the United States. Wild, cold, and cloaked in mystery. It's a land of ancient volcanoes, glaciers, and dense primeval forests. The weather is unpredictable, and the wildlife is far from friendly, especially the roaming packs of wolves and massive grizzlies that often emerge when darkness falls. And it was in this unforgiving land that an unimaginable story unfolded between a man and a wild beast. It all began with a single trail of blood on the frozen ground. Thomas, a veteran ranger in his 50s, was finishing his evening patrol when his eyes caught something. Dark red stains scattered across the dead leaves. He knelt down. This wasn't sap, and it wasn't deer blood either. It was fresh, thick, leading deeper into the woods. His heart skipped a beat. Something was injured, and it was desperately dragging itself away. But what waited for him at the end of that trail was one of the most dangerous creatures in the forest. Thomas moved slowly, following the signs. Claw marks, broken branches, crushed foliage. His heart pounded. A heavy, labored breath echoed ahead. Then he saw it. A massive gray wolf, tangled in rusted barbed wire, blood soaked across its back and legs. Its eyes, wide open, glowing, burning with primal instinct. The wolf was conscious, still strong, and could attack anyone who came too close. But what Thomas did next might leave you speechless. He wasn't carrying a gun, only a worn machete and old leather gloves. He knew full well wolves weren't pets. One lunge, one bite, and he could lose an arm. But he also knew if he left the wolf there, it would die, either torn apart by other beasts or taken by the cold. He took a cautious step forward. He knew one wrong move could be the last he ever made. The barbed wire dug deep into the wolf's belly and legs, flesh torn, blood pouring. Thomas knelt, hands trembling as he cut through each coil. Every snap of the blade felt like a ticking death clock. The wolf growled, but didn't bite. It stared straight into his eyes, a gaze so raw it gave him chills. Sweat dripped from his forehead, mixing with blood on his gloves. Finally, one last coil fell loose. The wolf collapsed to the ground, panting, then slowly stood and backed away. It didn't run. It didn't attack. It just stared at him, as if something had changed. But Thomas had no idea. That gaze was the beginning of a bond the wild had never known. After returning from the forest, Thomas told no one what had happened. Who would believe it? A man rescuing a wild wolf? No. They'd say he'd lost his mind. That night, lying in his small cabin by the woods, he couldn't sleep. He remembered the wolf's eyes, how it didn't run, didn't snarl, just looked at him, calmly, as if saying, "Thank you," in a language no words could ever express. He named it Ash, for its ashen fur and smoky, distant eyes. He thought he'd never see it again, but the forest always finds a way to reunite strange destinies. 3 weeks later, on a misty morning, Thomas headed out for his usual patrol. As he passed through a field of tall grass, he felt something off, like he was being watched. He turned, and his heart clenched. Ash stood just a few meters away. No growl, no fear, just standing there, calmly, as if this was where it belonged. From that day on, Ash quietly followed him on patrols, always at a distance, always appearing, then vanishing like a ghost. But Thomas had no idea. That presence was only the first step in a sacred vow of blood. One early winter morning, snow hadn't fallen yet, but thin ice hid beneath dry leaves. Thomas crossed a rocky slope into a dangerous area where a few deer had been mauled by a bear the night before. He didn't want anyone else getting hurt, and he didn't wait for backup. Just a few steps in, he slipped. Then, thud, he crashed into a deep, dark pit. Swallowed whole by the earth, and in that darkness Thomas had no idea something far worse was waiting. His leg was numb. A sharp, searing pain, possibly broken. He couldn't stand. A rustle above the pit's mouth. A massive head appeared. Blood-red eyes, claws like blades. A giant grizzly. It roared, a sound that shook the stone walls. A declaration. "You're mine." Thomas pulled out his knife, hands trembling. He knew this was the end. But sometimes salvation comes from the unlikeliest of places. Just as the bear lunged, a howl ripped through the air. Ash and his pack, they stormed in like a blizzard. 6 wolves, growling, fearless, surrounding the bear. Ash struck first, sinking his fangs into the bear's neck, another bit into its hind leg. A wild battle broke out, ferocious, brutal, relentless. No one backed down, no one fled. Because this wasn't just a fight, it was a promise written in blood. Roars echoed through the valley. The bear thrashed, trapped in a storm of fury. One savage swipe, Ash flew back, blood pouring from his side. Another wolf's leg broke, leaving it whimpering in pain. But they didn't stop. They didn't run. They fought like warriors born to protect one man, Thomas. At last, the bear let out one final roar, then turned and stumbled away, disappearing into the blood-soaked brush. The wolves stood still, eyes locked, bodies bloodied, breathing heavy but alert. Ash turned back, ran to the pit's edge, and looked down at Thomas. And in that moment, Thomas understood. Between him and that wild creature, the boundary of species no longer existed. Thomas was found hours later by a rescue team, slumped against a rock, clothes torn, face bruised, but still alive. Weeks after the incident, he had nearly fully recovered. The bruises, scratches, even the broken leg were healing. He returned to the ranger station, back to his work, patrolling, taking notes, chatting with visiting hikers. But something had changed. Every time he walked into the woods, he stopped by the rocky ravine where he had once fallen. He'd sit in silence, his hand brushing over a piece of bark etched with one word, Ash, now faded by time and rain. He hadn't seen Ash again, but he didn't need to, because now every gust of wind, every distant howl echoing through the forest made him feel like Ash was still there, watching, a silent guardian, an invisible soul, forever by his side.